I'm good with that.
Recording in progress. What's up, fellas? An abbreviated
Yeah,
episode of the blind pig courtesy of BGObsession.com. Running the trio tonight. We might have someone loop in, but we aren't holding our breath on it, so we'll see. Been a while since we had a pod, so I'll kick off the intros. And then we'll follow it up with just some light banter about current events. Top left is Mark. Bottom middle is John. Oh, sorry. Mark hails as home. Bottom middle is John. He
Yeah,
hails as
let's get that
Boone.
straight.
What? And I'm Derek. You can call me Silent Threat on the board. Come by, mix it up, have some fun, hang out. Let us know what we can do to improve the pod. Throw out some topics if there's something you'd like actually to have us talk about. We're always open to suggestion and guest appearances. So, fellas, we haven't talked in a couple weeks. We never did a draft reaction, a true draft reaction. What throw something out there. What do you guys want to mix it up about?
let's talk about the draft just for like 5 minutes. What were your all's reactions to it?
Well, I was talking to Derek right before we went on here that it's kind of good with 3 weeks or so now of perspective and getting over our personal outrage that they didn't choose the guys we wanted them to choose. It feels to me now like Forbes is the one guy whose name kept popping up in the little rookie camp, and that's a good thing. That's what we wanted to hear. It means nothing, but you didn't want to hear, well, he looked lost out there and he broke his fucking knee on the first play of mini camp. So so far so good. As to the rest of it, I saw one clip of the rookie Rodriguez, the running back.
Mhm.
It looks like a horse, man. I think
Mhm.
that guy might
Yeah.
bring him in for the Rigo drill at the end of a game once in a while for 5 carries or something. So I'm happy enough now. We haven't seen anybody fail, so that's good. We also haven't seen anybody do anything, so we're neutral.
I think my only, I don't even want to say gripe, but just kind of irked me a little bit was the fact that we went back to back defensive backs. Just not had nothing to do with Forbes or Quan Martin, because I think they're both going to be, especially like the Quan Martin pick, but it's just that I think when they did that, they kind of forced themselves into a position where they almost had to go best O lineman available with the next pick in the third round. And I just never liked that. I would have liked to have seen them be more aggressive and maybe even move up if they could. And not, I don't know. And that maybe Ricky Stromberg and then Braden Daniels, maybe those were the guys on their board that they had, really highly rated. I know I've seen a lot of love for Stromberg
Yeah.
since the draft. And I think Braden Daniels is a good player too. But I just felt like they kind of hemmed themselves in then at that point, and they almost had to take whoever the best offensive lineman was. But other than that, I mean, like we said in the past, the one thing this regime doesn't really deserve a ton of criticism on is draft selections. They've done a pretty good job. I mean, Jamie Davis is probably the one we bitch about the most, but he even may turn out to be a great pick. It's still too early to tell, but anyway, I didn't have any major issues with it. I thought it was a really conservative draft, and I also
Well,
wondered whether that may have been the situation, how it played out, because I did hear rumors that they were trying to make some moves, even that they were going to go grab Richardson. They were trying to.
Yep.
Um, but I also think the situation with new ownership coming in, it probably, and I'm not saying anything was said to them by the prospective new ownership group, but I think it probably lent itself to being a little more conservative just with the way they were approaching it. But
um, just to piggyback on that, I think another big part of it was who we all saw on the board when they picked these guys. Like not to we were looking at the board in the second round and we took a second DB when there was first round offensive interior lineman talent sitting out there. So again, you're right. The Quan Martin pick looks like he's going to be a contributor, but it's you took a DB in the first round. Now you're taking a second DB when we have what a lot of us to believe our biggest deficiency right now is interior offensive line, or at least our biggest question mark. And two of the top 5 best offensive linemen in the draft are still there, and you opt to not take them. So the center they take that they took later, maybe he's going to work out to be our starting center for the next 10 years. Here's what I know. John Michael Schmitz, I believe, was still on the board, and everybody believes he could be the center for the next 10 years. So that was my own
Derek, let me mention one other thing. And we did that even though we released the offensive line coach, who apparently has been the magician keeping subpar O linemen playing above average, playing above their skill set for the last 3 seasons. So that's my other makes me nervous kind of a thing. And you got Sam Howell with 1 start under his belt back there behind that line, a new offensive coordinator. Oh, by the way, who the plays are going to be different. It's just a lot of. That seemed like if you were gonna commit to, like, we're gonna fix one position group in this draft, that seemed to me to be the one that you had to fix. And I'm not sure we did that, but
well, it's interesting, right? That's how we all went into it feeling. And what's surprised me since the draft is I have seen mostly from analysts in the business all really kind of like that we doubled down on the defensive backfield. I've heard several commentators who, I mean, I don't know, I didn't hear what they said before the draft, but they were indicating, that in the NFC East, with the kind of offenses we're going to be going up against, and it's a passing league, yada yada yada, they kind of like what we did. I would agree going in. I mean, we were all jumping up and down to fix the offensive line. One new factor with the offensive line is we've got a new offense, and I don't know what Bieniemy wants out of his OL. Maybe he's taking a look at what we've got and what he's planning to run. He's feeling a little bit differently about it than we are. I hope that's the case, because I agree. In my heart of hearts, I'm still thinking I really wish we had taken 6 offensive linemen.
And I guess one of the points I did make last year was we were not scheming the offense to help out our O-line. We were regularly leaving. I mean, we watched John Bates get lined up 1-on-1 against Kayvon Thibodeau after he had been abusing our O-line for 3 quarters. We watched Charles Leno 1-on-1 against Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa, or whichever Bosa brother is up in San Fran. So maybe that's part of it, is that Bieniemy's confident that he's looking at the film from last year and saying, well, hold on a second, this guy shouldn't be on an island. Here's where I keep the tight end in the chip, or my running back is going to be able to support there, and we don't need to invest a massive high end draft capital into the O-line. These are serviceable because the offense Turner was running wasn't exactly doing them any favors.
Or he may be looking at Sam Howell, who doesn't seem to have with a small sample size, he's not known to hold on to the ball for 4 seconds, a la Carson Wentz. And even Taylor Heineke was pretty bad about that at times, just holding it and holding it and holding it. And, there's not many offensive lines that can hold it for extended periods. No matter
Tell you what, I've gone back since Bieniemy got hired. I've watched the condensed versions of several Chiefs games from the last year or two, specifically to see what kind of offense it is. Now, it's a big caveat that he's got maybe the next great Hall of Fame quarterback starting. Yes, that's a thing. But one thing you will notice about Bieniemy's offense is the quarterback is not holding the ball. That ball is coming out. I mean, it's coming out quick. Now, part of that is a quarterback who's got the recognition and the ability, but I think that's also the scheme that Bieniemy defaults to. I'm really looking forward to seeing that kind of quick, fast break offense where we're not dropping back 5-7 steps and waiting for something to develop down the field very often. At least that hasn't been set up. I think we're going to see an awful lot of stuff out in the flat. I think we're going to see draw plays. I think we're going to see all the stuff we haven't seen under Scott Turner for the last few years.
Well, and additionally, just to touch on Bieniemy, you want to take 2019 when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. You want to take a wild guess who the starting center was? He started 16 games, 99% of the snaps, 1,043.
I don't know.
Guy by the name of Austin Reiter, somebody
Hmm.
who apparently couldn't even carry the jock straps in this town. You know, so that's kind of one that where I do wonder how much of our offensive deficiency or what appeared to be offensive line deficiency was the scheme. And
Yeah.
can Bieniemy have a guy like Austin Reiter who gets cut from Washington, never makes it past the practice squad, latches on in Cleveland for a couple years, then gets in Kansas City, and now he's got 2 rings.
So much of this now, I know we're getting a feel of the draft already, but so much of the success of this 2023 team is going to have to do with how far Sam Howell has progressed. And if he doesn't have to be a Pro Bowl player, but he's going to have to be solid. If that guy is solid and doesn't kill the team and can put up 24 points a game, this team has got a roster built to compete. I think it almost more than any time that I can remember, there's an awful lot on the shoulders of this kid. And it's Bieniemy and the quarterback. If they can work together and get this thing going a little bit, this team might be unrecognizable.
To your point,
Well,
somebody put
one
on
thing we've got going for us is, people are like make a big deal about him being a 5th rounder, but when you're picking a quarterback in the 5th round, that usually means you weren't 1-16 or 3-14. So even though he's only got that 1 game of NFL experience on his resume, he's coming into an offense we have a shitload of talent on that offense.
We do.
So, I mean, if I don't know that it's as bad as, and you got a great, supposedly great offensive mind, Eric Bieniemy. I'm not sure he's not like coming into almost one of the best rookie, essentially rookie quarterback starting scenarios of anybody in recent history. I mean, he's going to have a lot on him, and that's going to determine to a large extent, I agree with you, how the season goes. He's got a pretty good supporting cast. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, somebody posted on Twitter a post-draft power rankings, and they had the Commanders ranked 32nd.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think
I immediately chimed in. He said, "Where did I mess up?" And I immediately chimed in and I said, this was a 500 team with the worst quarterbacking in the league. Beyond the worst. We didn't even have a quarterback ranked in the top 32 between Wentz and Taylor when you look at a lot of the metrics and a lot of the analytics of it. So if Howell maintains that level of play, you have to imagine, even if we take a step back, we're not the worst team in the league. Could go 3-14. You know what I mean? Like, when you're talking about the 32nd team in the league, you're talking about picking first overall. You're lucky to win 4 or 5 games. I even if we take a step back, and believe me, our schedule's it's difficult. Not as bad as the Giants, but it's difficult. So
Everybody's schedule is difficult.
right.
So,
well, we have a couple grinders.
I wanted to mention a couple of the undrafted free agent guys. Kaz Allen, who I think Rivera
Yes.
called Allen Kaz
Mhm.
or something. But anyway, the wide receiver, the returner essentially from UCLA, who I believe I heard today had a 72 touchdown high school season. I believe I actually heard that. Don't kill me if I'm exaggerating, but that's what I thought I
Good
heard.
God.
High school career, maybe, I hope.
No, I
Maybe.
think it was season. I
That's
think it was.
crazy.
But anyway, he did both punt and kick returns, and I think that guy's really intriguing. And I also am kind of interested in I don't know if it's Demaray or Demarat, quarterback from Fordham. I think he could possibly be the 3rd quarterback. But anyway, I thought anytime you grab any kind of undrafted free agent, and I think Allen probably makes the team as a returner. I really think he's that good.
So, just according to the internets, in 2017-18 season, 255 carries for 238 yards average per game.
Oh.
He averaged 238 yards per game, 62 rushing touchdowns, 72 total touchdowns. In this,
That's crazy.
are you
Yeah, that's a
kidding
little
me?
insane.
Are you kidding? So you're telling me every fifth time
And-
he touched the
And he
ball,
didn't
he's-
get drafted. I mean, I know it's high school or whatever, but
yeah, but still.
So to anybody listening, when you go to the thread tomorrow to look at this podcast, there are going to be whatever YouTube vids exist on the internet on this kid in high school. We're going to post them.
There's a couple because I or not high school, but at least one
Yeah,
in college. I
bookmark those
posted
bad
one
boys.
in the undrafted free agent
Hey,
thread where he took the ball and it looked like he got shot out of a cannon.
So we're gonna be efficient tonight. Before we move on from draft, John, you mentioned this. If we had traded up to 7 and grabbed Anthony Richardson, at least me, I would have, well, I would have been stunned that we pulled off something like that with an ownership change coming, obviously. But 2, that was the one kid, I think it's such a gamble. I mean, he's there. That is just a 100% throw your chips on the table and hope that you get the inside straight or whatever. But if that kid is anything near what he has physically available to him, that would have been unreal. I think that guy I think he's a beast. I've watched a lot on him and listened to him talk and his whole manner and all that. They might have something special up there.
well, I wouldn't have been a proponent of that, but I also agree with what I've heard you say it. I've heard you say it 10 times over the last 10 years, but if they see a guy that they believe is the next great quarterback and they can get him, you got to get him.
You got to get him.
If they believe that, I would have just bit my lip and crossed my fingers and hope for the best. I think Hal has a chance to be a really maybe not a top 5 quarterback, but a really good starter. So, and I could be totally wrong. I've been totally wrong before.
No, I agree with that. I keep trying to find a comp for Sam Howell, and it's really hard to do. I mean, this is a toxic name kind of around here, but Kirk Cousins is a damn good professional quarterback, probably not a Super Bowl level quarterback, but he's a 10, 12-year starter who's, a peripheral Pro Bowl talent type guy. I think Sam certainly has that kind of capability, almost as a floor to me. And you're going to laugh at me, but while I was home earlier, I flicked on our NFL Network, and they had those classic games, and they were showing Dan Fouts in the 1980 playoff overtime game, the Kellen Winslow game, when it was 41-38 in overtime. And I'm watching Dan Fouts, and I'm thinking, that's what Sam Howell looks like to me.
He's got that build, doesn't he?
The build, the manner. Fouts didn't waste any motion. He stood in traffic.
I mean, I'd like to think Drew Brees would be a comp, but Drew Brees, I think Howell's is physically built. Yeah, I think he's a little more stout than.
Yeah, he's stout.
Kind of a guy. So I don't know.
I'll throw out a name that I want, and I wonder if he can remind you of this guy, but Russell Wilson, sneaky athletic, can break the pocket, and if he does, he can get some yards, but at the same time, he's got the arm to get the ball downfield and got the ability to make pretty much every throw, and he's smaller in stature. Now Wilson was Houdini for years back there, so I don't know that he's got that escapability level, but I think that they run a similar 40 time. I think in space he's athletic enough to be productive like that, and he's got a hell of an arm. I mean, I think the arm is capable of doing things that we haven't seen here in a while. Now, just back to your original point, I'm so glad we didn't take Richardson, and I'm just going to tell you why. It's got nothing to do with Richardson. It's got everything to do with I do not want this regime making a choice on a quarterback that is going to force feed the next regime's decision. If you take Anthony Richardson 7, that's your quarterback for at minimum the next 3 seasons. You can't move on next year if you move on from Rivera.
Yeah, I agree with.
And we
would not have been beefing up the O-line and the defensive backfield because we'd have given all those picks up to
get up there.
Yeah, Derek, and that's a legit point, and I can't even say I disagree with you. I guess I've spent so many years on that soapbox, and until
you're not wrong,
that guy, no matter how you get him, until you get that guy, you are not going to contend. And that guy, there's something about that guy that spoke to me. I am not an NFL talent evaluator. So all I can do is watch his career. Now, just like I'm going to watch Kenny Pickett, who walked by our front door, and we didn't invite him in last year. That guy turns out to be a 10, 12-year Pro Bowler. I'm going to say the same thing about, well, with Richardson, we didn't have a chance to get him. So it's a different conversation, but that would have made for some really interesting podcasts if we had done
Well,
that.
look, I 1000% agree with you. Is if you don't have a Super Bowl capable quarterback, you don't stop until you get a Super Bowl capable quarterback. Now, obviously, there's plenty of Super Bowl capable quarterbacks in this league that may never win because it's hard to win. But you got to get your guy. You got to get that guy. So I just don't want, I want to get rid of this having to overpromise to get coaches in here, and I want to build it the right way. I want the new GM to get brought in. I want a new GM. By the way, I don't know if you guys heard what Josh Harris said, but he said a good GM is priority one when it comes to building a franchise. So
Music
I think
to my ears.
yeah, I know. I
So-
almost ran around my house without my shirt on. But
So there's breaking news. I don't know if you saw this just now, but apparently in the next 5 to 7 days, the evil empire is going to come crashing down in Washington. We have the owners meeting coming up like within the next 5 to 7 days, right? 22nd.
Yep.
22nd, yeah. Are they actually going to put the vote? Is it official?
I mean, everything I've heard indicates that they're going to vote. Is there any doubt in your mind?
What's the breaking news? I thought you were looking at something that just came over.
No.
Oh, yeah,
Just
okay.
jerking your chain.
Go on,
Okay.
man.
I was being
Well, no,
ironical.
I've heard that there's concerns with finalizing some of the financials that it might not make it onto the docket that's coming in May, at the end of this month. But
I just have to believe they want it done, and they're going to whatever. If they have to work, 24/7 between now and then, I think it's going to get done.
Yeah, I'm sort of in between. I don't care what date they do it. I'm convinced at this point it is happening. So to me, whether it happens in 5 days or in 30 days or in 45 days, I don't really care because it is going to happen. What I do want to see is I want this done so that we can stop talking about that and we can start listening to Harris and he can start answering questions that we all have about what comes next. That's the rush to me at this point.
Well, the bitterness, the fan bitterness and open warfare has not ended since the Snyders announced last week that they were selling or that they made an agreement. It's still, oh my God, social media. Go on Twitter and talk about the name change, man. It is just it's brutal. And
apparently Harris came out and said that changing the name is not a priority on their list.
Well, what I heard was that he said he didn't say anything. Some folks who are in the know.
Oh, okay, yeah. Said
they said and they said it clumsily, which is the last thing you want to do when you're talking about something like the name change. But he said it wasn't on the table, and then he said, "Oh, it hasn't been discussed." Which let me tell you, Kevin Sheehan went on an epic rant today on his podcast, which I totally agreed with. That anyone that believes that they have not talked about the name and whether or not they're going to change it or not, that's just fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
they may well have decided they're not going to go down that path, but they sure as hell have talked about it.
Have we established with any officiality? I'm not sure that's a word. Whether or not they would have to wait X number of years now after the last name change. I have never heard a final disposition on that.
I think it's officially been acknowledged that the league can do whatever it wants, and probably with new owners, that would not be the case. It's actually the 5-year thing's actually part of like in the bylaws related to like changing uniforms and changing.
Yeah, and doing a rebranding.
It doesn't even specifically reference the name itself, but I mean, I don't think that's the barrier. I think it's just going to come down to, do they want to go there? And I thought Sheehan brought up a really good point, which is both of the top 2 guys in the ownership group are local Maryland guys who grew up during were young adults during the Gibbs glory years. So they damn well know what all the issues are with the name, and they damn well know how they feel about it and whether or not it makes sense to go forward with putting everyone through that again. I don't want to get into that whole thing. I'd go through it in a heartbeat because just because my whole thing is, they knew that this name wasn't even on the list of fan favorites. It wasn't even in the top 20. If you go back and look at the polls that they themselves did, and then they shoved it down our fucking throat anyway, and then told us to be happy about it.
The day that they determined they were changing the name, they came up with Commanders. I'm convinced of that. And then it was 2 years of dog, dog and pony show to try to act like they're going to try to come,
I think Rivera's thumbprints are all over that name, and it is what it is. I'm not gonna, like I said on Twitter today, I hate fan police. So if you've been a fan of this team for more than 15 minutes, you have the right to feel however you feel, man, and no one should begrudge you that, and no one should tell you to shut up and get back in your box. And I see a lot of that on Twitter. I may have to take a Twitter break before long. But anyway, the good news is they know how they feel about it, and they haven't informed us. I don't know what they're waiting for, but I'm sure the very first press conference that the new ownership group has, they will be asked, and they will either shut the door on that, or they will say we're looking into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all they have to say is we have a whole long laundry list of really big important issues that we need to tackle, and we plan to take them all and look at them very carefully, and we don't have your answer right now. Me personally, I want that conversation to happen 2, 3, 4 years down the road. I don't want that to be one of our first orders of business.
Oh, it can't happen 4 years down the road. That's just saying it's not going to happen.
I'm not sure I agree with that. If the team comes in, if the new ownership comes in, let's just go crazy here and assume that this year they managed to win 10 or 12 games and they bring Rivera back. Don't blow your gaskets. And the team is all of a sudden competitive and going to the playoffs in 2 or 3 years under Sam Howell as the Washington Commanders. I think the conversation about the name is over.
It is over, which is that's essentially saying they know, Mark. It's not even worth talking about. They know right now today, either they want the name changed or they don't. They know that, and they also probably know they've probably done enough looking and to know what fans want, whether or not what the fans want.
I'm not sure I agree that they've made up their minds. I think if I'm trying to put myself in Harris's shoes, and I think I got a lot of big issues to deal with, changing the name is not one of them right off the bat. I want to own the team. I want to figure out the stadium. I want to figure out.
Did you see the poll that Kevin Sheehan did today?
Wait a minute. I don't think that this would not be my priority. It wouldn't even be in the top 3 or 4 for me if I'm the new owner of this franchise. And I think by the time it did became, and I've dealt with those first 2 or 3 or even 4 bigger issues, I'm not sure the name is going to be a factor anymore. So, I mean, you may be right. They may know what they're going to do exactly. I kind of hope they don't. I hope they're taking let's play this out and figure out what our real priorities are and deal with it one at a time.
Kevin Sheehan put up a poll, and again, it's just a Twitter poll, but it mirrors every poll that's been done. And it's like people say, well, it's a social media poll. Well, then the team did polling that showed, that people didn't want this name. They just ignored it. But the poll he did today basically said, of the priorities, in the context of what are the top 5 priorities, something like 25% of fans said it was their number 1 priority to change the name. Another 35% said it was towards the top of the list, and then another small percentage said it was a priority, but not in the top or middle priorities.
I would not have been one of that 35%.
So I'm just saying, I'm not making a judgment statement on that.
I get it.
I'm just saying that if they're looking at that kind of data, that's a pretty big thing to say, well, if more than half the fans can't stand this name, we got to do something about that. And maybe they won't. Maybe they could give a rat's ass. That could be 100% correct. And if they say right out of the gate that they're not going to change it, or they're going to stick with Commanders, I will never say another word about it, because what's the point of it? I mean, at some point you have to get on board with whatever direction we're going, right?
Well, the other part of this that has a major impact of this is do Harris and the NFL collectively look at this and say, we want to get rid of Dan Snyder, period? You know what I mean? This name, Redskins, was pre Dan Snyder. So if we were still Redskins, obviously nobody would be having this conversation. But Dan Snyder is the one that would own the team when this name was put into place. And whether or not you want to believe he has his fingerprints on it doesn't really matter. But around the same time that this name got put into place was when Dan Snyder was getting evicted from his apartment. Like, so do they look at it that way and say, this guy's getting ousted in a way like we've never seen before in this as of an NFL owner? Okay. There wasn't a flat out vote, but he is so so divisive. He is so
Toxic.
hated and so toxic, and so many people want to separate themselves from him, that maybe looking at that changing the name is a fresh start with under a new ownership group. Whether you think the name sucks or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're giving them credit for working as a body and having that kind of, that's a fairly nuanced thing to think about. I don't give the owners that much credit. I hope you're right. That would be great if they vote and say, by the way, you got to change the name, open a poll up, and we're going to call them the Warriors, and do your fucking copyright war and name it right this time. I'd be really happy with that.
I guess my whole thing, and the reason this is kind of funny because I've gotten lit up on social media a lot. I usually get accused of being a Red Wolves fan. And if you remember, I openly mocked the Red Wolves crowd.
The Red Wolves movement, yeah.
I said it was a Pokemon name. Let's call them the Charizards, or, it has nothing to do with like my preferred name. I just want it to be a name that the majority of fans and want. And then the next thing you'll get assaulted with if you say that is there is no fan that there's no name that the majority of fans will like, or that it's not going to be the Redskins. No matter what they pick it, fans will hate it. And I just don't buy that at all. It's like there were names, as we know. They would have been fine with Wolves. They would have been fine with Red Wolves. They would have been fine with Red Tails. Probably.
No, not Red Tails.
Wolves, plain Wolves.
Okay.
I'm just saying the bulk of fans would have been, we wouldn't still be talking about the stupid name if they hadn't just gone out there and picked some random meaningless fucking name that no one even knows.
Well, the other part of it was the whole delivery of it. First off, you can't convince me that they didn't have this name picked out from the day they announced that they were going to change the name. We saw this stupid behind the scenes making a brand nonsense. And then people were dissecting videos of Rivera holding a helmet with the reflection. And if now you look back and look at that, say that's the freaking helmet, and he was holding it, and then you look in the background and there's fucking leaves on the trees. So it's been since at least summer, well before the polls were closed. So this has been known well before now. Then you have the rollout where they do this half-assed nonsense on the Today Show, and you've got Jason Wright sitting next to Doug Williams, sitting next to the host, and he goes, "Doug, what's the name? We're the Commanders." Like, well, come on, man. Like, the whole thing around all of it was just cheesy
It was bad.
It was
poor John Allen got dragged out there. He looked like he wanted to die.
not to mention, there's a live feed from a helicopter the night before shooting into FedEx Field's
into the team store,
fucking
right?
team store. It's got Commanders plastered all over.
Getting triggered now, man.
This is why
it's a rash again.
That's the point. This is why there's such animosity and such vitriol around the name. Look, Commanders can work, okay, if you do it right. I think we all can agree that if they were to take it down, if Harrison and the group were to come in and say, look, this boot was terrible, we're going to go back to the original uniforms, but we're going to adjust the uniforms to, instead of Redskins, it says Commanders. I mean, I don't know why you had to read, like, why? You're forced to change the name. Why change the uniforms? You you can buy into some of the military, you can buy into some of those aspects of it, but you do it in the right way, and you do it tastefully, and you do it with different, like, I own Commanders jerseys. I own 2 of them. I'm gonna root for the team. We're what, 100 podcasts deep about this, and we started this not long after they announced the name change, or right around the same time. So we're gonna root for the team, and if it stays Commanders, it stays Commanders. But at the same time, there's so many better options and so many better ways to roll it out. So many better ways to handle yourself. So many
Oh,
better ways
and
to.
by the way, the name itself, as meh as it is, we'll get used to the name. There are
Right.
worse names in professional sports. There are Nuggets. There are
Bills. What the
There,
hell's a Buffalo Bill? Like
I mean,
the Cleveland
when-
Browns.
But Mark, the difference is that none of those teams had their beloved moniker of
stripped from them.
the
oh
1930s
no, I agree.
ripped
I
out of their
agree.
fucking chest.
No, I
and
agree.
labeled
No,
racist.
my point, you are right. My point is that the name itself, Commanders, is no worse than a whole fuckload of other professional sports names out there. What bothered me far more than the name was how unbelievably lame the uniforms are. They are I don't know if Tanya designed them because she always wanted to be a fashion designer. I have no idea, but they're bad. They're bad. There's no logo. I mean, I am not a designer. Trust me. I could sit here with Microsoft Paint probably, and I could have come up with a logo for Commanders and some uniforms.
You look at what some of the fans came up with. I mean,
That would have, yeah, there were some really nice looking things out there. They didn't do any of that. That bothered me more than the name. So who knows? Maybe that's what we'll get from
This took us collectively an hour on a thread between about 10 of us to come up with a BGO logo that I think I would take that logo over just with that.
Yeah, they incorporated the DC flag and make that a W, right? And
yeah, with the black camo
or WC, right? No, that wouldn't work. Never mind.
No, W.
No, you just make it the B and G with transposed over the DC flag, and you call them the burgundy and gold, man. I don't understand why what isn't appealing to more people, but anyway, we're not gonna read.
Again, I'll go back to what we said, and we'll move on to the next segment, whatever that's going to be. But what I started out saying was, I think that if the Washington Commanders are in the playoffs 2 or 3 years in a row and are on the ascent, I don't think a lot of people are still going to. I don't think 35% of the fans are still going to say the number one issue is changing the name. I think people will start to take the name, and it'll start to sound a whole hell of a lot better than it does now.
I agree with you, but I also think a lot of the venom has less to do with the name and a lot more to do with what surrounds it.
That's fair.
The guy who owned the team when it came into place, the reason why we ended up here, the people in the way that it was rolled out, a lot of the other things that it's embarrassing. Like, I watched that live and I'm like, that was the most. I mean, you could do 1,000. You know what you do? You line up Terry McLaurin, Chase Young, and John Allen in the tunnel, and you got fog coming out, and you let them walk on the damn field in the uniforms, and then you announce Commanders or something that was just more than just 3 guys sitting on directors' chairs in the middle of a field to announce a team name.
Who's the guy that does "Let's Get Ready to Rumble"? He should have been announcing it.
Right. I mean, why not? Why not? Come on. Like,
they fumbled that big time. It was an embarrassment.
I just never want to hear brand or rebrand ever
yeah,
again.
yeah.
You know what? And I wish Jason Wright could get this. We don't care about your fucking brand. We're not responsible for generating swag revenue. That's your fucking job. So stop talking about the goddamn brand. It's not a brand. It's the name of the football team that we've rooted for our entire life.
You know what's a brand?
Marketing idea. That's my.
You know what's a brand? The Hogs, Route 281, the Fun Bunch. Those are brands.
I swear to God, if they went to the fans and the fans came up with monuments, as bad as that is, I would celebrate it. I would be like, you know what? If that's what the fans want, we're the monuments. Let's go.
I might have to become a Nuggets fan.
Oh my God! But anyway, if you're one of those fans, as Kevin Sheehan said today, I was so proud, even though he's catching a lot of shit for it. He said, if you're one of those people that's telling people that want the name changed and who are spouting off about it on social media, if you're one of the ones telling them they're terrible fans and they should go root for another team,
Yeah, go away.
you. That's what Kevin
Right.
Sheehan said on his podcast today. Fuck you. And he's exactly right. Like, you know what? Just shut up. If you don't want to go through it again, and you like Commanders because you're Commander Ken on Twitter or whatever your your
Yeah, then
handle is,
buy all the gear.
that's
Do what
fucking
you're.
great.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. I really am. I'm happy for you. But a lot of people can't get past the name. So just shut up. They have a right to say what they want to say, and just don't
Well,
be a
it's just
dick.
like you should no. Don't tell anybody how to mourn a loss. Don't tell anybody how to be a
Right.
fan. Like look, we have a lot of different personalities on our board, and we've put up with a lot of shit. To this day, I don't think anybody's actually ever been truly. No one person has ever been truly banned, but that wasn't because of their fanhood. But that's what should unite us all. Is the fact is the logo, not how you are as a fan. It's the same thing. Guess
The
what?
greatest meme of all time, and it will never be surpassed. Worry about yourself. I wish people could watch that that should be instead of the pledge of allegiance in schools. That's what we need to fight for. Is that meme needs to start every day. Worry about yourself, America. It's really okay.
So at the risk of setting John off, we talked about Jason Wright, and the reason I thought about this is the whole concept of brand these days. I think we may be defining it as a little bit more narrowly than a guy like Jason Wright defines it. Brand, to me, when I think of it in modern context, like in a musician, it goes to everything: the style, the appearance, the social media presence. That's that whole conglomeration of different things. That's what I think they mean by brand.
I think you're right. I mean, and the whole thing about like we're going to be an integral part of the community, all of that stuff.
And that sounds great. If you haven't already, and this is a shout out to Kyle, my son, who I haven't mentioned in at least 3 pods now. Speaking of Jason Wright, did you guys see his appearance with Pat McAfee? He did like a 20-minute, a full 20-minute segment. I encourage anyone who is really anti Jason Wright. I've been kind of ambivalent on Jason. I'm a little disappointed in some of the product that's come out of his office. But I don't have a problem with him like some folks do. I highly recommend. I'll post this in the thread too. It's worth a listen because I thought he presented himself really, really well, and that's a pretty sharp son of a bitch. So I'm
he is very intelligent.
He's always presented himself well. He's a smart, articulate guy.
Well, and there's
the issue.
But go give it a listen, and then maybe we'll talk about it on a future pod or not. But I think any real fan of this team, and he is our team president until he's not someday, worth a listen. I thought he did a hell of a job on there.
Do you want him to continue as the team president, you guys?
I want Josh Harris, Mitch Rales, and their team to decide if Jason Wright is the right guy for the job.
It's not a football position.
No, he's not a football guy. If they want to keep him on in the front office and they think he's the right man for, maybe he's a transition guy or whatever, absolutely. I have no problem. I've got no problem with Wright under Dan Snyder. I have no idea how much of what we think is Jason Wright is Dan Snyder versus how much has been Jason Wright.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I don't feel like he's in touch enough.
You don't feel like he's what?
In touch enough. Like it's the details with me. He understands marketing, but he doesn't understand this fan base. Okay, like, and maybe he can learn. Look, it's true, but honestly, he's young. Okay, so just like a first-time head coach, he's gonna have bumps and bruises. He's gonna do things that as you learn more and you do other things, you mature. So I guess there's opportunities there. He's very intelligent, very well spoken. He absolutely could be an ambassador. But I see some of the fun. Like, I go back to not the Sean Taylor Memorial unveiling, but the year before that with the jersey retirement. That announcement wasn't made until like the Monday before the game. And everybody was in uproar. And he was asked about it, and he said, I didn't realize so many fans were gonna want to be a part of it. And things like that sit with me. It's like, you did the right thing, and you could argue that he did the right thing retiring Sean Taylor's jersey. That's a whole different conversation about whether Taylor's jersey should or should not be retired, because there are other people that quote unquote are more deserving, that are historical members of the franchise. But to not understand that fans were going to want to be there and be a part of that celebration of life, and that it's hard for me to look at you and say you're going to be a good decision maker going forward when it comes to being in touch with the fan base. It's hard.
Well, I mean, and I can't, that's fair. And that's been your impression. And I got no problem with why you feel that way. I understand it. Again, my two things: one, I don't know how much of what comes out of his mouth is because Dan Snyder's had his hand up his ass, like working him
like a puppet. Yeah.
And two,
well, and that,
I feel very differently about him, having watched him talk and answer the questions that he did the way that he did on that Pat McAfee thing. I found the video of that show. So I'll post it on the board tomorrow. All I'm saying is it's worth a listen. I'd be interested to see if it affects how you feel about him at all.
Well, and to your point, Mark,
how much of that is he's campaigning not to get fired?
You will judge for yourself after you watch the video.
But to your point on that, Mark, about how much is how much is Dan Snyder, is, can we truly say that anybody that's been working under this franchise for the last 24 years, can we truly judge them? Or is there a Dan Snyder factor on every level of it?
I don't think you can dismiss the fact that Dan Snyder's.
Well, I know. I agree.
Yes, we don't know how much, but of course it's had an effect on everybody.
Right. Beyond just Jason Wright. Sure. Ron Rivera. Could Ron Rivera be a different coach next year? Could the scouting department be different next year?
I mean, there's a grown man with experience. It's not their first job. They first of all, they willingly, knowing everything that we know about Dan Snyder, more than any other previous employee, came in with allegations out there already, came in and took the job. And I know I'm not faulting him for that. It's an NFL job. I mean, for God's sake, they're going to take it. I get that. But that only goes so far, man. The whole, I don't think Dan Snyder's been in Ashburn in a year. So, that might explain the first year where they were saddled with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, with Rivera and company, but I'm talking about just looking back over the last 25 years. What would Shanahan's record be if Dan Snyder wasn't the owner? Would Sean McVay still?
Shanahan left because
and I'm sure a lot of it had to do with
Gibbs left.
And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with, a lot of that
had everything to do with Dan Snyder.
But that's my point: is how many of the people that have passed through this building have been limited because of and I'm not saying literally Dan Snyder walks in their room and says blah blah, but the Dan Snyder effect, hanging out with Clinton Portis at the bowling alley, chumming it up with RG3, who was very quick to talk about how much better things are going to be without Dan Snyder as the owner. Because
I feel so much better now that RG3 has put his imprimatur on it.
Where's your tell-all book, sir? But how much of that do we really look back and say, could we have been that much better if Dan Snyder wasn't forcing them to take Dwayne Haskins? You know what I mean? Like,
and RG3.
Right.
So one thing that I'm gonna try to take the pledge next week or whenever the official announcement comes and Dan Snyder is officially no longer listed under owner on the website. I'm gonna take a personal pledge that, like, I'm letting the bitterness go, man. I'm letting no matter what happens going forward, I'm like, because I really don't have anything against people like Jason Wright or Ron Rivera. There have been good things and not so good things, but I'm done. I'm not gonna get in a twist about names and mistakes and games that we lose that we should have won. I'm just gonna thank Jesus that Dane Snyder is not at the top of the food chain, because that means that there will be potential for future better paths and better results and better, more success and everything else. So I hope all fans will do that, however long it takes you to do the full body cleansing. I'm going to let the healing begin. That's what I'm gonna do.
This is going to be the worst non-alcoholic or substance related hangover I've ever tried to get over in my life.
That's right.
There is going to be a hangover, and there are going to be flashbacks. But what I was thinking earlier today when we were thinking about going and doing a podcast again, and I did all the emotional stuff already, so I think I'm over that. But I'm hopeful that I am going to be able to be patient with this new group, and because I'm going to want to win so bad, and I'm not going to want to wait. If we're 2-3 after 5 weeks and the team is kind of stumbling, I'm going to have my usual football related angst. They should be doing this, that, and the other thing differently. And it's going to be really tempting sometimes to say, it's the same old Commanders, because Washington, right? How many times have we said that? It's going to be hard for me to get over the hangover. It took us 24 years to dig this hole. It's going to take more than one off season or one regular season to tamp the dirt down and bury the body.
Yep. Amen on that.
Very much so. But I think the honeymoon period should last a couple years. I don't think it will, because let's be honest, and I think you can all agree with me, Redskins fans are crazy.
Well, and it's the internet age, man. We don't.
Yeah,
30 days ago might as well have been last century.
The most popular person in Washington, according to Redskins fans, is the backup quarterback. Cam Sims is a Hall of Famer. Okay, let's be real. So there's going to be people are going to get excited, but this new ownership group this coming season should not count, because it's literally they're going to come in and observe, and they're going to decide which pieces they want to hold on to. Then they're going to start building. I mean, we're talking probably 3 to 4 years before it's actually that group. You know what I mean? Like, before they actually start to see return on the investment. When it comes to on-field production. Off the field, I mean, within 10 minutes, they should start acting like normal human beings. And that alone will bring the level of, appreciation up from the floor way back up.
Players, man. I think the players are looking forward to this shit. And it's not.
Yeah, and then, yeah.
I think players have a different perspective because the owner, pays them. That kind of matters. And we've heard players like Santana Moss said, I never had a problem with Dan Snyder. He's nice to me, took care of me, gave me, extensions. And as far as that stuff goes, but I think the players are just so tired of every fucking press conference and every interview. It's just this drama and the Washington shit, that just gets laid on them. And I feel bad for them because I feel bad as a fan because we've had to put up with it, but I especially feel bad for players because they just want to play football and they want to win and they want to be successful. And so I think that could make a big difference. It's going to feel like a normal NFL locker room, and not that there won't ever be drama, but I don't think it'll ever rise to the level that we've had to live with for the last 20 years.
I'm guessing all the three of us and anybody listening to this, we've all worked in a bad workplace with a bad environment before, with bad bosses.
Yep.
It doesn't keep you from doing your job, but it has to affect the output, right? As an office and everybody pulling on the same rope and all those cliches and all that. But a toxic workplace is hard to be your best and produce your best. It is for me. Maybe I'm not strong enough to rise above it all the time. I'm glad that my paychecks don't bounce, and I work just as hard under a bad boss as a good one. But I think I'm probably better in a good work environment. You just I don't know, you want to contribute more. It just seems like things work better and flow better. I'd really like to think that that's part of what's been holding us back. Otherwise, it's just been incredibly bad luck on the field.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. We can dig into that, and I don't. It's not just bad luck on the field, man. Luck is. There was a quote that I heard a long time ago. Luck is a product of preparation meeting opportunity. Okay, and
it's clever. I'm not sure I buy it.
well, a
Sometimes
lot
you
of
just
what
get
people
lucky. You buy a lottery ticket and it wins. You are lucky.
true, but you had to buy that lottery ticket.
Okay.
So
yes, there's a certain base of expectation on your
but when it comes to the teams like the Chiefs, I mean, they're perennial winners, and they say they seem to always get the calls and they get lucky. Well, that's true, but they also have the best player in the NFL on their team, right? Like, so, and they have one of the best coaches in the NFL on their team. So it goes well beyond just getting lucky.
We used to get a lot of calls too back under Gibbs 1.0. The ball bounced our way and we got the calls then too. Yeah, you're right. You kind of do make your own luck to a certain extent.
So I want to ask, go ahead, Derek.
Well, I was just going to say to tie a bow on that is when you have Paul just responded. When you have an owner that nobody likes, who's treating his people like trash, who's making decisions that are not quality, you're creating luck, but you're creating bad luck. Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace. That was not an unlucky situation. That was a terrible pick, right? The Chiefs didn't get lucky with Patrick Mahomes. They knew who they wanted, and they ultimately traded up to get him, even though they had a Hall of Fame quarterback on their roster. Or at least you could argue a fringe Hall of Fame quarterback on their roster. When the Patriots took Tom Brady, that was lucky that they got him in the 6th round. But they had done their homework. They had done their preparation.
Well, I'm not going to equate those two. I'll push back on that. I give the Chiefs a hell of a lot more credit for trading up into the 1st round to get Mahomes than I do for Brady on their second, 6th round pick falling in their laps.
Right. All right. Well, okay. Then remove Brady was lucky.
Russell Wilson is a little bit, even though he was a 3rd rounder.
Well, better yet, Josh Allen. Okay, the Buffalo Bills got Josh Allen. There was a lot of questions and concerns about Josh Allen. They did their due diligence. They made a game plan. They didn't get lucky with Josh Allen. You see what I'm saying? So you can create your level of luck when it comes to the NFL.
I guess. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I can see that side of the argument. I can also see the side of the argument that Patrick Mahomes, they got a little lucky that he turned out to be arguably the next guy we're talking about on Mount Rushmore. Even he was so much better than even the Chiefs.
I mean, I'm just gonna put it this way. We could have stumbled onto Patrick Mahomes and we would have turned him in to somebody that looked like Dwayne Haskins.
Maybe. Yeah, he would not have been.
Because when you have someone like Dan Snyder that's lording over an entire organization, interfering, intimidating, threatening, backstabbing, every possible negative activity you could engage in, it impacts everyone. It impacts, we've seen it impact the front office. We've seen it impact head coaches, Hall of Fame head coaches.
John, you're making my point. You're making my point is sometimes like you affect luck. Maybe you don't create it, but you affect it. Okay. If we had drafted Tom Brady, we don't win 6 rings, man. We're not celebrating our 9th championship. You cannot tell me that's the case. The atmosphere.
Dan Snyder, absolutely not.
No, right.
I'm a karma guy, and I just believe the universe hates assholes, and it's going to punish you, man. If you hit your horse to like one of the biggest assholes in sports history, it's not going to go well. It's just not. And it's not been going well for 20 years. So I just can't wait for him to be gone, man. I think they should just come in there with a power washer, man. The whole thing. Just get
This is actually happening, you know. We're getting into the weeds already on the team and rosters and managers and the team president and all that shit. The big news actually happened. And we are moving into the next phase. I did not think I was going to see this. Well, maybe not so much in my lifetime, but I was expecting Dan Snyder to turn this team over to his kids, and I would die before I ever saw this team owned by someone other than Snyder's. So I'm still not over this, and I'm still just kind of buzzed about the whole thing, and all of this other stuff we're talking about almost seems secondary to me to that big overriding thing that this actually fucking happened. And we're watching it in real time, and I hope that we are able to keep our perspective on this and we don't lose sight of it and get into too much of the minutia and realize we have a chance now for the next 24 years to maybe be a legitimate professional sports franchise without all the bullshit and all the baggage. Mind-blowing to me. And thank you to people like Megan Imbert, whom we may be talking to next week. John, why don't you run with that?
Yeah, we're going to invite Miss Imbert back. She was on the Blind Pig probably about maybe a year ago. Has it been that long?
It's been longer than that.
Yeah, at least half a year.
Really, like in the thick of this, and at that time we were just praying that something could come of, the allegations and people coming forward like Emily Applegate and her and Melanie Coburn and all of the other women, the ballsy women that came forward. And we had very little faith at that time that Roger Goodell and the NFL were going to do anything. And I think one thing that we have to acknowledge is I think Roger Goodell and the NFL had to have been a part of the pressure that is forcing him out or forcing him.
So Megan Imbert joined us on February 16th of 2022.
So we had a great conversation with her back then, and we're going to bring her back. If for no other reason, we do have a reason, because we want to hear how she's feeling. We also, and what's important, because one thing I think that's really important for us as fans is to know that, like, this is not the end of what Dan Snyder did to those employees and did to the franchise as a whole, as an employer and as a leader of that organization. And it's ending for us, thank God. And I know Megan is thankful for that. And I know I heard Melanie Coburn speak to that they're thankful that the franchise is getting a fresh start and getting him out. But there's still a lot of shoes to drop. And so we want to hear from her. Well, we also want to acknowledge her as being one of the key people. I told her she's a bulldog. I mean, she, one of the things they're concerned about we won't do the pod before the pod, but I know they're very concerned about him coming after them in a punitive way after this is over. And I think that's a legitimate concern. So
yes. And that was going to be the one point I was going to try to make tonight. And we'll make sure that we make this next week with her, is that we are fans of the team and all that. And the fact that Snyder's no longer going to be the owner doesn't end the issue. His culpability and his responsibility for it continues. And that's what I'd like to ask her about what her hopes and expectations are about what comes next now that we've gotten to this point.
And one step further than that, we're all celebrating Dan Snyder being out. I think everybody, I know the three of us on this podcast and everybody who's joined this podcast would agree that we're not celebrating what got us here. Like what they had to endure and what they had to go through was the linchpin that ended up being, for lack of a better term, the straw that broke the camel's back. I think ultimately it was financials, but we're not excited and happy that they had to go through what they went through to put us in this position.
No, we are a little bit in celebrating and very grateful that there were people who had, John said ballsy. I can't really think of a better way to put it, to stand up to the kind of pressure and ridicule and all that doing that brings. Pretty impressive stuff.
While we might be celebrating Dan getting ousted and we might be celebrating not having him as an owner anymore, we need to make sure that we understand that they went through some things that that we don't wish on anybody, and we respect them for being strong enough to stand up for it, and we want to
And
make
I-
sure that on the backside of this thing they come out of it hopefully okay.
And I hope the NFL, as cynical as I am when it comes about the NFL and Roger Goodell and what's important to them, I would hope at a very minimum that it's been a huge wake up call to them that, like, there are other owners who might be for up if they engage in this kind of stuff or have engaged in this kind of stuff. And the whole effort to whitewash, which they still continue to do because they have not released the previous report, the Wilkerson report. They continue to peddle that bullshit story about there being no report. We'll see what Mary Jo White's report says if and when they ever get around to, strangely enough, going to coincide with Dan Snyder not being in town anymore. It's kind of what a coincidence. But anyway, I think the NFL still has a lot to do to reassure people that this is not acceptable and it's not going to be acceptable in the future. And
that's going to be the next. That's not going to be a Washington Commander story. That's going to be a National Football League story on how the Mary Jo White report is handled. And not only how it's released, which I'm assuming at some point it will be released, but what happens then, and to what extent the NFL is going to be willing to stand up and take some responsibility for how all this went down, because that's a really big story that I think is still to break. Where we may be done with it here in Washington as it pertains to our football team. But man, that story is far, far from over. When that report comes out, and I mean, we know the NFL, they sat down with Snyder. I don't think I'm saying anything that most people don't know, right? They sat down with Snyder and they decided, no, we're not going to release the Wilkerson report. We'll just say it's our oral report, and we find the guy, and okay, it's all done. I don't think that's going to fly. I think we're going to be dealing with this story for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, our 30-minute podcast went 65 minutes. So
it's okay. We kept it under an hour and a half, man. We're doing good.
We will be back next week for those listening. Megan and Bert will be on the show or the pod, as far as we know right now. So it's going to be a must tune to drop early Thursday, late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning of next week. So fellas, it's been a pleasure. Just getting caught up. Too bad we were missing a couple, but we'll see them here in the coming weeks, and we'll have a lot to talk about. We might do a celebration pod once the ink is dry and everything, and pop some champagne bottles. But
word,
it was a pleasure, boys.
Hell, guys, good to talk to you.
Guys.